Audiobooks presents On the Tranquility of Mind by Lucius Annaeus Seneca. Are you looking for serenity in a restless world? Delve into the heart of Stoic philosophy with On the Tranquility of Mind by Lucius Annaeus Seneca. In this timeless work, Seneca offers us a practical roadmap to achieve unshakable inner peace, dealing with the instability of fortune, anxiety, and the boredom of daily life. Prepare to discover how true joy resides in virtue and acceptance. It's time to silence the external noise and find the calm that resides within you. Let's begin this journey towards tranquility. Chapter 1. In examining myself, O friend Serenus, some vices manifested themselves so openly that they could almost be cut with a hand, and others more hidden and not continuous, but which returned at certain intervals. And I consider these to be the most troublesome, because, like vague enemies, they assault on occasion, allowing no time to be prepared as in a time of war, nor to be careless as in peace. I find myself in a state, it is right to confess the truth to you as to a doctor, where I neither see myself free from these faults that I feared and abhorred, nor do I find myself completely surrendered to them. I see myself in such a disposition that if it is not the worst, it is at least lamentable and tedious. I am neither sick nor fully well, and I do not want you to tell me that the beginnings of all virtues are tender, and that with time they gain strength. Because I am not ignorant that even things for which one strives for esteem, such as dignities and the fame of eloquence, along with all the rest that depends on the opinion of others, are fortified with time. And that thus, both things that have true strength and those that are bribed with some vanity, wait for duration to gradually give them color. Beyond this, I fear that the very habit that usually gives constancy to things may not introduce the vices further into my inner self. Prolonged conversation of both good and evil engenders love. What this disease of the soul, perplexed between the two, without going strongly to the good or the bad, is I will not be able to show so well by saying it all at once, as by dividing it into parts. I will tell you what happens to me. You can name the disease. I am possessed of a great love for temperance. So I confess, I am pleased by a bed not adorned with ambition. I am not pleased by clothing taken from the chest and pressed with 1,000 torments that force it to make different sheens, but by the homely and common, in which there was neither care to store it, nor should there be care in putting it on. I am pleased by food that did not cost my servants sleepless nights, nor cause admiration to the guests. And I am not pleased by that prepared over many days, nor that which passed through many hands, but by the ordinary and easy to find, without anything being placed on my table of those things that high price attracts, but those found everywhere, without being annoying to the estate and the body, and without them being such and so many that they must exit by the part where they entered. I am pleased by the less cultivated servant and the coarse slave, and the heavy silver of my rustic father, without it having considerable workmanship, and without the name of the craftsman being engraved on it. I am pleased by a table not celebrated for the variety of colors, nor known in the city through different successions of curious owners, but one that is sufficient for use, without pleasure occupying or envy kindling the eyes of the guests. But after being pleased by these things, my spirit is distressed to see in others a great quantity of pages and slaves gleaming with the gold of liveries, more elaborate than those of mine. I am also troubled when entering a house full of riches and adorned with gilded coffers. And I am pressed by the flattering populace that continuously courts those who squander their estates. What shall I say of the fountains that, transparent to the bottom, are seen in the dining rooms? What of the exquisite delicacies worthy of the theater? What I can say is that coming from the remote provinces of frugality, excess surrounded me with great splendor, making all around me a sweet harmony, with which the squadron wavered somewhat. But against it I raised my spirit with more ease than my eyes, and with this I retreated, not worse, but sadder, not finding myself so delighted among my dull belongings, where a silent remorse assailed me, doubting if the more costly ones were better. And although none of them overcame me, none failed to combat me. I am pleased to follow the force of the precepts, entering into the midst of the Republic. And although I enjoy putting on the insignia and honors of a judge, it is not to be dressed in purple or surrounded by golden rods, but to be more willing to assist my friends and relatives and all mortals. Being closer, I follow Zeno, Cleanthes, and Chrysippus, none of whom approached the Republic, although none of them failed to direct others to it. To which, when I allow my unaccustomed mind to approach, if perchance something unworthy or uncommon occurs, as is ordinary in human life, or when things to which little esteem is due demand much of my time, I immediately return to leisure. And just as the run is swifter for tired cattle when they return to their home, so my spirit is more pleased to confine life within its own walls. Therefore, let no one usurp a single day from me, since no equivalent recompense can be given to me for such a loss. Let the spirit rest in itself, value itself, and not get involved in the things of others, nor do those in which the judge can intervene. Let it love tranquility that is not entangled in public or private cares. But where the important lesson raised the spirit, and where noble examples provided spurs, one immediately desires to go to the tribunals to help some with advocacy and others with favor. And although it seems that this should not be of profit, let it be attempted to be so, to curb the arrogance of whoever is unreasonably puffed up by seeing himself prosperous. I deem it more correct in studies to fix the eyes on the substance of things, and for the language to accommodate them, providing them with words so that the sentence follows, without excessive care, the part where the things guide us. What need is there to adorn what is not going to last many centuries? Do you intend for the future not to pass you in silence? Note, then, that you were born for death, and that burial with silence is less troublesome. Write some subject in a simple style, and let it be to occupy time for your benefit and not for ostentation. There is less work even for those who write for the present time. When the spirit rises anew with the greatness of some thought, it then becomes haughty in words, because in the manner that it aspires to high things it tries to speak with loftiness. And then, forgetting the law of adjusted judgment, I let myself rise high, speaking with foreign lips. And so as not to discourse individually on each thing, I say that this disease of the sound understanding follows me in everything, and I fear falling little by little into it. And what gives me the most concern is being always suspended, imitating one who is about to fall. This indisposition being greater than the desire I have to cure it, because we look upon domestic things with friendliness, this favor being detrimental to judgment. I understand that many will reach wisdom if they are not persuaded that they had already achieved it, and if they had not concealed many things in themselves, looking at those of others with sharp and attentive eyes. Do not think that flattery only destroys the business of others and not your own. Who is there who has the courage to tell himself the truth? Who is it who, placed among the multitude of flatterers, did not flatter himself? I beg you that if you know any remedy with which to stop this storm I suffer, you will judge me worthy of owing you tranquility. I know well that the movements of my soul are not dangerous to me, nor do they bring me things of unrest. But, to declare to you with a true simile that of which I complain, I tell you that what fatigues me is not a tempest, but boredom. Free me, then, from this indisposition, and help him who suffers in sight of land. Chapter 2. When I am silent and alone with myself, I ask myself what this affection of the soul seems similar to, and by no example am I more properly informed than by that of those who, having emerged from some serious and prolonged illness, are still bothered by slight ailments, and even after completely discarding the remnants of the indisposition, suspicions worry them. And, being already healthy, they offer their pulse to the doctors, discrediting any heat they feel. The bodies of these people are not sick, but merely unaccustomed to health. The same thing happens to the sea and the lagoons, which even after the storms cease and they are tranquil and calm, some swells remain. Therefore, it is necessary that you use not those harsh precepts that we have already passed over, nor that you resist on some occasions, nor that you make an effective appeal on others. The latter is enough, which is to give credence to yourself, persuading yourself that you are on the straight path, without allowing yourself to be carried away by the transversal tracks of many who, at every step, are making new discourses, and being on the path, they err from it. What you desire is a great high thing and very close to God, which is not to change. The Greeks call this firmness of mind stability, about which Demetrius wrote a famous book, and I call it tranquility, because I have no obligation to imitate them, nor to translate the words to their style. The matter in question must be signified by some term that has the force of the Greek word, even if it does not have the same face. What we are now asking is in what way the spirit will always be equal, and how it will proceed with a prosperous course, being propitious to itself and looking upon its affairs with such joy that it is not interrupted, persevering in a placid state, without being dissipated or dejected. This is tranquility. Let us seek, then, the path by which we can completely reach it. Take the part of the public remedy that you wish, and above all things you must fully expose the vice, so that everyone knows what part of it affects you. And with this, you will see how much less encumbered you are with the boredom of yourself than those who, tied to honorable occupations and working under the yoke of magnificent titles, are detained in their pretense more by shame than by will. In the same place are those troubled by shallowness, as well as those fatigued by boredom, and those who live in continuous change of intentions, being more pleased by those they left, just like those who, having become idlers, are shouting all day long. Add to these those who, imitating those who have difficult sleep, move from one side to another until exhaustion brings them quiet, forming the state of their life in such a way that they ultimately stop, not in the one that the hatred of changes placed them in, but in the one that old age brought them, making them incapable of new undertakings. Also add those who do not cease to be frivolous by ceasing to be inconstant, but who, being lazy, live, not as they wish, but as they began. Innumerable are the qualities of faults, and only one is the effect of vice, which is that of being discontented with oneself. And this arises from the intemperance of the soul, and from cowardly or not very prosperous desires, which do not dare to do as much as they crave, or do not achieve it. And advancing in hopes, they are always unstable, a necessary accident for those who live dependent on the will of others. Their entire lives are spent in striving for things that are not very honest and very difficult. And when their work is left without reward, the unfruitful indignity torments them, without the repentance being for having pursued evil, but for their desires having been frustrated. And then they find themselves possessed by the pain caused by the regret of what they started and the pain they have for what they have to start, an unrest of mind entering into them, which finds no outlet in anything, because they can neither subject their desires, nor do they know how to obey them, from which arises an irresolution of undetermined life, and a stoppage of the mind sluggish among determinations. And these things are most troublesome to them when, due to hatred of laborious unhappiness, they withdrew to leisure and quiet studies. which the mind raised to civil affairs does not admit, nor the one eager to work because it is naturally restless. And so, when it finds itself lacking the consolation and delights that occupations gave it, it cannot stand its house, its solitude, and being confined within walls, grieving over seeing itself left to itself alone, from which boredom and displeasure are born in it, and a restlessness of mind that is not very firm. Shame causes them internal torments, and the desires that are seen imprisoned in a narrow place and without an exit are suffocated, from which results becoming saddened and withered, for being contrasted by infinite waves of the uncertain determination that afflicts them, in which begun things keep them suspended, and cried over things keep them sad. From this mainly originates the affectation of those who, detesting their leisure, complain that they lack decent occupations. And from this also arises the envy of the advancements of others that feeds on their own laziness. And thus, those who could not advance desire the ruin of others. And finally, this aversion to the progress of others and the despair of their own fortunes engender a mind angry against fortune, and querulous of the times. And he who sees himself withdrawn in corners and reclined in his own pain, while he is tired of himself, also has repentance, because the soul is naturally active and inclined to movements, the matter that offers itself to rise and abstract being agreeable to it. And this is much more so in some very bad talents, which willingly allow themselves to be consumed in occupations. I would say that to those whose desires have taken hold of like sores, taking work and fatigue as delight, the same thing happens as to some wounds that crave the hands from which they are to receive harm, and as to the body's scabies, which delights in what makes it more painful. Because many things with a certain pain give pleasure to our bodies, such as moving them from one part to another, to refresh the side not yet tired, in the manner that Homer painted Achilles for us, now placed face down, now turned to the sky, changing in various postures, it being very typical of the sick not to last long in one state, taking changes as a remedy. From here arises the making of vague pilgrimages and the sailing of remote seas, making, now in the water and now on the land, experience of the hostile shallowness. Sometimes we say that we want to go to the province of Campania, and when the delightful tires us, we move to the Bruchian and Lucanian forests. And after this we want some place of recreation to be sought in the mountain where the lascivious eyes are exempted from the lengthy filth of horrid places. And for this we go to Taranto, and its celebrated port and other sites of more temperate climate, to spend the winter in the houses that were once capable and opulent to their ancient population. Then we say, let's go back to the city, because it has been many days since our ears lacked the clamor and applause, and we are pleased to see human blood spilled in the spectacles, moving from one festivity to another. And in this way, as Lucretius said, everyone goes fleeing from himself. But of what good is it to him, if he never finishes executing the flight? He goes following himself, so that a heavy companion bothers him. It is therefore convenient that we undeceive ourselves, confessing that the fault is not in the places, but in us, who are weak to suffer work or delight, our things or those of others, for a long time. Change of intentions has caused death to many, relapsing into the same things without giving way to novelty, from which it resulted in life and the world itself causing them boredom, saying with an enraged complaint, "How long must the delights be the same?" Chapter 3. You ask me what remedy you should use against this weariness, and according to the opinion of Athenodorus, the best would be to occupy yourself in public matters, in their administration, and in civil offices. Because just as some men spend their days toughening their bodies in the sun with occupations and exercises, And just as it is very useful for wrestlers to spend a lot of time strengthening their arms for the service to which they dedicated themselves, so for us, who have to prepare our spirits for the fight of civil affairs, it is highly appropriate to always assist in the work, because with the intention of becoming apt to help his citizens and everyone, he who, placed in the midst of occupations, administered private and public matters according to his means, comes at the same time to exercise himself and to be useful to others. But after this, he says that since in this so crazy ambition of men there are so many slanderers who twist what is just to the worst part, simplicity comes to be unsafe, with what hinders being more than what helps. It is therefore convenient to move away from the tribunals and public posts, which the Great Spirit also has in retirements where it can roam. And just as the impetus of lions and other fierce beasts does not intimidate me when they are enclosed in their caves, so the actions of great men do not cease to be great, even if they are removed from the crowd. These people withdraw in such a way that wherever they hide their quiet, they do so with the intention of benefiting everyone in common and each one in particular, whether with their ingenuity, or with their words, or with their advice. Because not only do those who sponsor claimants serve the Republic, and those who defend the accused, and those who have a vote in matters of peace and war, but also those who exhort the youth and those who, in a time when there is such a lack of good precepts, instruct minds with their virtue, and those who detain and divert those who rush to riches and excess. And if they do not achieve it completely, they at least delay them. Those who do this, even retired, handle public business. Does the magistrate and judge who pronounces sentences communicated with his assessor among neighbors and foreigners perchance do more than he who, retired, teaches what justice, piety, patience, fortitude, contempt for death, knowledge of the gods, and finally the great good that consists in having a good conscience is? Then, if you spend time in studies, even if you move away from offices, it will not be to abandon them or fail in your obligation. Since not only does he who is defending the right or left side in the field militate, but also he who guards the gates, and he who assists by doing sentry duty in the parade ground. Because although this post is less dangerous, it is no less careful. And so, although these cares have less to do with blood, they begin to enjoy the stipends and salaries. If you retire to your studies and leave all the weariness of life, you will not come to covet the night because of the boredom of the day, nor will you tire of yourself, nor will you be annoying to others. You will bring many to your friendship, and all good men will seek you out. Because even if virtue is in a dark place, it never hides. Rather, it always gives signs of itself, and whoever is worthy of it will find it through the tracks. But if we move away from communication, and renounce dealing with men, living only for ourselves, that retreat will be followed by a solitude, lacking all good study and a lack of occupations, with which we will begin to plant some buildings and to tear down others, to divide the sea, to conduct its waters against the difficulty of the places, badly consuming the time that nature gave us so that we would employ it well. Some of us use it with temperance and others with prodigality. Some of us spend it in such a way that we can account for it, others without any remains of it being left to us, for which reason there is nothing more clumsy than to see a very old man who, to prove it, has no other testimony than years and white hair. It seems to me, O dearest Serenus, that Artemidorus yielded too much to the times, and that he fled from them too quickly, because I do not deny that a retreat must sometimes be made, but it must be at a slow pace, without the enemy understanding it, preserving the flags and the military reputation. Those who surrender to the enemy with their arms are safer and more esteemed. I judge the same to be convenient for virtue and its lovers, that if fortune prevails, and cuts off their faculty and possibility of doing good, they do not immediately flee, nor, turning their backs disarmed, seek where to hide, it being certain that there is no safe place or exempt from the persecutions of fortune. In such a case, let them enter into the business of the Republic with greater courage, seeking with good election some ministry in which they can be useful to their city. He who cannot be a soldier, let him aspire to civil honors. If he must lead a private life, let him be an orator. If silence is imposed on him, let him help his citizens with advocacy. If he is in danger in the tribunals, let him show himself in the houses, spectacles, and banquets a good neighbor, a faithful friend, and a temperate guest. And in case the ministries of a citizen fail him, let those of men not fail him. And for this reason, having gallantry of spirit, we have not enclosed ourselves in the walls of one city, but rather we have gone out to the commerce of the entire world, judging the whole world as our country, to give with this a wider field to virtue. If you have not been able to become a counselor, if the pulpit is forbidden to you, and they do not call you to the meetings, fix your eyes on the great latitude of provinces and peoples, and you will see that never is such a part forbidden to you that the part left to you is not much greater. But note that this fault is not entirely yours, for not wanting to serve the Republic, if they do not make you an auditor or one of the 50 magistrates, or a priest of Ceres, or supreme dictator. Will it be good for you not to want to be a soldier if they do not make you a general or a tribune? If others are in the first front, and fortune placed you in the rear guard, fight from there with your voice, with exhortation, with example, and with your spirit. He who, standing still, strengthens the others with shouts, will find a way to help in the war, even after both hands are cut off. You will do the same if fortune separates you from the first posts of the Republic, if you are firm and help it with voices, and if they close your lips, do not falter, help it with silence, because the care of the good citizen is never useless, since it always bears fruit with the ear, with the sight, with the face, with the will, and with a tacit obstinacy, and even with the steps themselves. Because just as many salutary things are useful just by smelling them, without coming to taste or touch them, so virtue spreads 1,000 utilities, even if it is far away and hidden, whether it uses its right, or has the precarious entrances, finding itself obliged to gather the sails, whether it is idle and mute or imprisoned in a narrow place, or whether it is in public, because in any costume it will be useful. Do you think that the example of one who lives well in retirement is of little fruit? I assure you that it is a very superior thing to mix leisure and business when active life is prohibited, either with casual impediments or with the state of the Republic, because things are never so completely closed that there is no room for some honest action. Could you perchance find any city more lost than Athens was, when the 30 tyrants tore it apart, having killed 1,300 of the best citizens, without this putting an end to the city that was irritated with itself? In this Republic, where the most rigorous tribunal of the Areopagites was, and where the people and the Senate met in the form of a Senate, there also met every day a college of murderers and an unhappy tribunal, narrow for so many tyrants. Could that city perchance have any quiet, where the tyrants were as many as the guard soldiers, without any hope of freedom being able to be offered to the souls, and without any way being discovered for the remedy against such great force of misfortunes? From where then should so many Harmodiuses come out for the repair of such a miserable city? Because Socrates was in it, and he consoled the senators who wept, and he exhorted those who despaired of the health of the Republic, and he scorned the rich who feared losing their riches with the slow repentance of their dangerous avarice. And he gave those who wanted to imitate him a heroic example, seeing him walking freely among 30 masters. This one, then, who bravely opposed the squadron of tyrants the Athenians killed, that city being unable, when it saw itself free, to suffer freedom. And with this, you will see that in an afflicted republic there is occasion for the wise man to manifest himself, and that, on the contrary, in a flourishing and fortunate one, money, envy, and 1,000 other weak vices reign. In the form, then, that the republic is, and in the one that fortune allows us, we must unfold or shrink. But our movement must always be without becoming sluggish due to being tied down by fear. Rather, he can be called a strong man, who, threatened on all sides by dangers, and hearing the noise of weapons and the clang of chains nearby, does not trample on or hide virtue, it not being right to offend that which preserves him. I understand that it was Curius Dentatus who said that he would rather be killed than cease to live. The last of natural evils is to leave the number of the living before dying. But despite all that, it is convenient to do it when fate brings you to a less manageable time for the republic, so that with leisure and letters you help it more, and that, like one who finds himself in some dangerous navigation, you try to take port, not waiting for business to leave you, but leaving them yourself. Chapter 4. Above all things, it is convenient that we fix our eyes on ourselves and then on the businesses we undertake, for whom and with whom we undertake them. And the first thing that everyone must do is to sound out their capacity, because many of us persuade ourselves that we have the strength to carry more burden than we can actually bear. There are some who, in confidence of their eloquence, rush headlong. Others burden their estate more than it can suffer. Others oppress their sickly body with laborious occupation. Shame hinders some from the management of civil business, which requires a bold face, and for others their stubbornness is not suitable for court. Some know how to curb anger, and any indignation infuriates others. And some do not know how to set limits on jesting, nor abstain from dangerous buffoonery. For all these, leisure will be safer than occupation, it being good that an impatient and fierce nature avoids occasions harmful to its freedom. Chapter 5. After this, the things we undertake should be weighed, comparing them with our strengths, because it is always convenient that the strength of the one carrying is greater than that of what is to be carried, for if the latter is greater, it will be forced to oppress the carrier. Besides this, there are other businesses that are not so much great as they are fruitful, because they chain many others to themselves, and these, from which various and new occupations originate, are the ones we must flee from, without entering a place where we do not have a free exit. You should only lay hands on those things that it is in your will to do, or hope that they have an end, leaving those that extend to a greater latitude without being able to be finished when you proposed. Chapter 6. Finally, you must examine men to see if they are worthy of us employing part of our life on them, or if they contribute to the loss of our time. There are some who fault us for the good deeds we voluntarily did for them. Athenodorus said that he would not even go to the banquet of one who did not judge himself to be indebted by having him as his guest. I persuade myself that you will judge that this man would much less go to the houses of those who want to use their table to reward the friendships of their friends, computing the dishes as gifts, and wanting to excuse their intemperance by saying it is directed to the honor of the guests. Take away from these people the need for witnesses to their banquets, and they will have no pleasure in the secret feast. You must also consider whether your nature is more suited to the dispatch of business or to retired studies and contemplation, and then you must direct yourself to the part where the force of your genius guides you. Isocrates pulled a counselor from the tribunal by the hand, because he judged him to be more apt for writing histories and annals. Forced talents do not respond well, and if nature resists, the work is good. Chapter 7. There is nothing that delights the soul so much as sweet and faithful friendship. It is a great good to have breast disposed so that any secret may be safely deposited in one whose conscience you fear less than your own, whose preservation mitigates your cares, whose opinion clarifies your doubts, whose joy banishes your sadness, and, finally, whose presence delights your life. We must choose friends such that, as much as possible, they are free from desires, because vices enter slyly and then spread to everything they find nearby, offending with contact. For this reason, it is convenient, as is done in times of pestilence, that we do not sit next to infected bodies touched by the disease, because we will attract dangers to ourselves, and with mere communication, we will become sick. We must be so careful in choosing the talents of friends that they are without the slightest flaw, because mixing the healthy with what is not is usually the source of disease. But in this, it is not my intention to tell you that you should attract no others to your friendship than the wise, because where are you going to find this one, whom all ages have sought? You must consider him good who is not very bad, since you would barely have the convenience of making a better choice, even if you looked for the good among the Platos and Xenophons and in that fertile harvest of Socrates' disciples. And even if you enjoyed the age of Cato, who, having produced many men worthy of having been born in his lifetime, produced many others worse than in any other age, being schemers of great wickedness. And since both were necessary for Cato to be known, it was fitting that there were good people by whom he was approved, and bad people in whom his courage was experienced. But in this time, when there is such a lack of good men, let the choice be less tiresome, and in the first place, do not choose sad men, who weep over everything without there being anything that does not serve as a reason for complaints. And although these have faith and love, the companion who is always restless and who laments everything is contrary to tranquility. Chapter 8. Let us move on to wealth, a great occasion for human ruin. Because if we make a comparison of the other things that grieve us, such as death, diseases, fears, desires, and suffering pain and toil, with the other damages that our money brings us, you will find that wealth is what places the greatest burden on us, and so we should ponder how much lighter the pain of not having it is than losing it after having it. And with this we know that, just as poverty is a lesser matter for torment, it is also for harm, because you are mistaken if you judge that the rich endure losses more bravely. The pain of wounds is the same for pygmies and giants. It was well said with elegance that the bald felt the same pain as the bushy-haired when a hair was plucked out. You must understand the same thing about the poor and the rich who feel the same torment. Because both the one and the other are attached to money, it cannot be ripped away from them without pain. But as I have said, not acquiring is more tolerable than losing. And so you will see that those upon whom fortune never fixed its eyes live more contentedly than those from whom it withdrew them. Diogenes, a man of great spirit, well knew this truth, and he resolved not to possess anything that could be taken from him. This, which I call tranquility, you may call poverty, necessity, or misery, and give it any other ignominious name, that when you find someone free from perfidious people, I will judge that Diogenes was not happy, or I am mistaken, or only the kingdom of poverty cannot be offended by the greedy, the deceivers, the thieves, and robbers. And if anyone doubts the happiness of Diogenes, they may also doubt that of the immortal gods, thinking that they do not live happily because they do not have adorned gardens or precious villas cultivated by foreign household servants, and because they do not have great annuities in the treasuries. You, who are vain with riches, are you not ashamed of it? Turn your eyes to the world, and you will see that the gods who give everything are naked and possess nothing. Will you judge him who stripped himself of all riches as poor, or as similar to the gods? Do you consider Demetrius and Pompeianus happier, who were not ashamed to be richer than Pompey, having an account of the servants they had made to them every day, like the one made to the emperor of the soldiers in his army, their wealth having shortly before been 2 slaves, who, substituting, served for them, and a somewhat more comfortable room. A single slave he had, named Manes, ran away from Diogenes, and having found out where he was, he made no effort to recover him, saying it would seem a clumsy thing that Manes could live without Diogenes. But Diogenes could not live without Manes. It seems to me that in this he told fortune to do what it wanted, that it no longer had anything to do with him. My slave ran away, or rather, he became free. My servants ask me for food and clothing, it being necessary to sustain the stomachs of so many voracious animals, it also being necessary to clothe them, and to live careful of their snatching hands. It being inexcusable to serve ourselves with those who always live with weeping and complaints. Happier is he who owes nothing to anyone, but to whom he can easily deny payment, which is himself. But since we do not find ourselves with sufficient strength, it is convenient to at least narrow our patrimony so as to be less exposed to the injuries of fortune. Small bodies, which can be easily covered with armor, are safer than those whose very greatness exposes them more openly to wounds. In the same way, that state is safer, which neither reaches poverty nor departs from it with excess. Chapter 9. This moderation would please us if temperance first pleased us, without which no riches are enough, and without it none obey sufficiently. The remedy is so much in our power, being able, by merely admitting temperance, to convert poverty into wealth. Let us accustom ourselves to rejecting ostentation, measuring belongings by the need we have of them. Food should serve to satisfy hunger, drink to extinguish thirst, and desire should walk where it is fitting. Let us learn to rely on our bodies. Let us compose our eating and clothing, not giving new forms, but adjusting it to the customs that our predecessors taught us. Let us learn to increase continence, to curb excess, to temper gluttony, to mitigate anger, to look at poverty with kind eyes, and to revere temperance. And even if it costs us shame to give our desires remedies that are not very costly, let us learn to imprison unbridled hopes and the spirit, which rises to the future. Let us try to achieve riches from ourselves and not from fortune. I say, then, that such a variety and iniquity of events cannot be repelled without there being great torments in those who have displayed great apparatuses. It is therefore convenient to narrow things down so that the arrows do not hit the mark. From this it results that exiles and calamities often become remedies, separating more serious inconveniences with small ones. The spirit that rebelliously obeys the precepts cannot be cured with softness. So why does it not amend itself, if poverty, infamy, and ruin in all things follow from not doing so? One evil opposes another. Let us accustom ourselves to being able to dine without the attendance of people, and to use fewer servants, making clothes serve the purpose for which they were invented, and reducing ourselves to living in narrower houses. And not only must we turn back in the race and in the public contest of the circus, but we must also do it inwardly in these limits of life. Even the work of studies, being so ingenious, adjusts to reason only in so far as it adjusts to measure. Of what use are countless books and libraries, whose owner barely read the indexes in his entire life? The multitude of books burdens and does not teach, and so it will be safer for you to commit yourself to few authors than to err by following many. 40,000 volumes of books burned in the city of Alexandria, a beautiful testimony of royal opulence. Someone will praise it, as Titus Livy did, who called it an egregious work of the elegance and care of the kings. But neither was that elegance, nor was it care, but a studious excess. Or to say it better, it was not studious because they did not gather them for studies, but only for sight, as happens to many ignorant people, even of servile letters, for whom books are not instruments of study, but ornaments of their rooms. Let there be, then, a sufficient quantity of books, without any of them serving for mere ostentation. You will answer me that you consider the expense you make on them more honest than that on paintings and Corinthian vases. Note that wherever there is excess, there is vice. What reason is there to forgive less him who tries to gain a name by gathering marble or ivory statues than him who goes looking for the works of unknown, and perhaps reproved authors, being idle among so many thousands of books, only being pleased by the bindings and labels? You will find in the possession of very ignorant people everything that is written of orations and histories, having the shelves full of books up to the ceilings, because now even libraries are made in the baths as a necessary possession for houses. I would forgive it if this arose from a desire for studies. But now these exquisite works of sacred geniuses, carved with their images, are sought for the adornment and finery of the walls. Chapter 10. If you happen to enter some difficult way of life, and, without your knowing it, public or private fortune put you in some snare that you neither know how to untie nor can break, consider that prisoners at first suffer badly the chains and shackles that impede their steps. But after they resolve to wear them without becoming indignant about them, necessity itself encourages them to bear them with fortitude, and custom teaches them to carry them with ease. In any state of life you will find expansiveness, pleasures, and delights, if you first resolve to want not to judge the one you have as bad, not subjecting it to envy. Nature did not oblige us with anything more than with knowing that we were born for so many miseries, having invented, as a temperament for them, the custom of suffering them, which quickly converts into familiarity. No one would persevere in things if the continuation of adverse things had the same force that it had in the first attacks. We are all bound to fortune, but the chain of some is of gold and loose, that of others is tight and debased. But of what importance is this difference if the prison in which we all are is the same, those who made the prison also being imprisoned in it? Unless you also judge that the chain is lighter because it was placed on your left side. Honors bind and chain some, riches others, nobility others. Humility oppresses some, and there are others who have the empires of others over their heads, and others their own. Exile detains some in one place, the priesthood others, all life being a continuous servitude. It is therefore convenient to accustom ourselves to live in our state, without giving the slightest complaint about it, embracing in it whatever comfort it has. There is no case so bitter in which the adjusted mind does not find some consolation. Many times the art of the good architect arranges small sites for various uses, and good distribution makes the site habitable, even if it is narrow. Bring reason closer to difficulties, and you will see how with it rough things are softened, narrow things are widened, the grave ones oppressing less those who bravely suffer them. Besides this, desires should not be extended to remote things, and since we cannot narrow them down completely, we must only allow them what is nearby, rejecting what either cannot be achieved or must be achieved with difficulty. Let us follow what is near, and what adjusts and proportions itself to our hope. Let us know that all things are equally perishable, and that although outwardly they have different appearances, they are inwardly equally vain. Let us not envy those who occupy high places, because what seems like height to us is a precipice, and on the contrary, those whom adverse fortune placed in a state of mediocrity will be safer if they remove arrogance from the ministries that are inherently proud, lowering their fortune as much as possible to the flat ground. There are many who are forced to cling to the height in which they find themselves, for not being able to descend from it except by falling. But, for the same reason, They should testify that the burden they have is very heavy for them, for having to be heavy on others. And let them also confess that they are not elevated, but tied down. And let them prevent with meekness, with humility, and with a benign hand many aids for the events to come, so that in this confidence, although they live pending, they are with greater security. And nothing will free them from the storms of the soul as much as setting some fixed point to increases, without it remaining at the discretion of fortune to stop giving. Let them exhort themselves to stop much before reaching the extremes. And in this way, although there will be some desires that incite the spirit, they will not extend to the uncertain and the immense. Chapter 11. This doctrine of mine speaks to the imperfect, to the mediocre, and to the unhealthy, and not to the wise man, who neither lives in fear nor walks with caution, because he has so much confidence in himself that he does not fear encountering fortune, without ever surrendering to it, and without possessing anything about which he can fear it, because he holds as borrowed not only slaves, lands, and dignities, but his very body, his eyes and hands, and all that which can make life more lovable to him, living as though borrowed to himself, so that without sadness he restores himself to those who asked for him back. And he does not undervalue himself in knowing that he is not his own. Rather, he does all things with such great diligence and circumspection, as the religious and holy man who guards what was entrusted to his faith, and whenever he is ordered to return it, he will do so without giving complaints to fortune. But rather he will say, I thank you for the time I possessed it. I esteemed your things with veneration, but since you ask for them, I restore them to you with willingness and gratitude. If you are pleased to leave me something, I will also guard it for you. But since you have pleasure in it, I restore the wrought silver, the coined money, the house, and the family to you. If nature calls me, which was the first one to lend me to myself, I will also say to it, take back my spirit. I return it to you improved from what you gave it to me. I do not hesitate nor do I flee. It is ready for you, for I find myself without reluctance. Receive what you gave me when I had no feeling. What is the annoyance of returning to the part from where we came? He will live badly who is ignorant of the usefulness of dying well. The first thing, then, from which esteem must be removed is life, counting it among the other servile things. Cicero says that we abhor the gladiators who try to save their lives in a fight, and on the contrary, we favor those who despise it. I understand, then, that the same thing happens to us, timidly waiting for death often being the cause of death. Fortune, who also makes her rejoicings and spectacles, says, why should I reserve you, wicked and cowardly animal? Because you do not know how to offer your neck, you will be wounded and mistreated more. And on the contrary, you, who wait for the knife not with a forced neck nor with crossed hands, will live longer and will die with more ease. He who fears death will not perform the feat of a living man. But he who knows that at the time of his conception he capitulated to dying will live according to what was stipulated, and together with the gallantry of spirit he will make it so that nothing that happens in life is sudden to him, because by taking it as settled that everything that can come will happen to him, he will mitigate the impulses of evils, which never bring anything new to those who, being prepared, await them, and are only serious and heavy for those who live carelessly and only expect happy things. Because sickness, captivity, ruin, and fire are not sudden things to me, knowing in what tumultuous lodging nature enclosed me. Many times I heard weeping in my neighborhood. Many times I saw not yet ripe funerals pass by my door with torches and candles. Many times I heard the crash of proud buildings that fell, and many of those whom the tribunal, the court, and conversation joined with me, one night carried them away, dividing the hands united in friendship. Must I be surprised that the dangers that always walked close to me have reached me? Many men there are who, having to sail, do not remember that there are storms. I am not ashamed to have a bad author for what is good. Publius, more vehement than the tragic and comic geniuses, whenever he left the mimetic nonsense and the taunts and witticisms concerning the populace, among many other things worthy of gravity and the tragic scene, said, "What can happen to anyone can happen to each one. He who deposits this sentence in his heart and attends to the evils of others, of which there is such an abundance every day, and knows that they have a free path to come to him. Such a person will prepare himself before being attacked. The spirit is slowly armed to the patience of toils after they have arrived. You will say, 'I did not think this would happen, nor did I believe this could come to me.' Well, why didn't you think about it? What riches are there that poverty, hunger, and beggary do not follow? What dignity is there whose gown, whose augural habit, and whose insignia of nobility are not accompanied by filth, exiles, discredit, 1,000 expanses, and ultimately contempt? What kingdom is there for which ruin and fall are not prepared, having now a just master and now an unjust tyrant? And these things are not separated by large intervals, since there is only an instant of distance from seeing oneself on the throne to being prostrated before the knees of others. Persuade yourself, then, that every state is changeable, and that what you see in others can happen to you. If you boast of being rich, are you perchance richer than Pompey, for whom, when Gaius, his former relative and new guest, opened Caesar's house to close his own, bread and water failed him, and he who possessed so many rivers, that were born and died in his empire, begged for rainwater, dying of hunger and thirst inside his relative's palace, while the heir prepared a public burial for the one who was dying of hunger. Have you had great honors? Tell me if they have been so many, so great and so unexpected as those Serenus had. Well, note that the same day the Senate accompanied him, the people tore him apart, and having put in him everything that can be gathered by the gods and men, nothing remained that the executioner did not seize upon. Are you a king? Well, I will not send you to Croesus, who entered the pyre commanding and saw it extinguished, surviving not only the kingdom, but his very death. I will not send you to Jugurtha, whom the Roman people saw imprisoned within the year in which they had feared him, not to Ptolemy, king of Africa, nor to Mithridates, king of Armenia, whom we saw among the Chian guards, one being exiled and the other wishing to be so safely. If in such great mutability of things that rise and fall you do not judge that everything that can happen to you threatens you, you will give strength to adversities against yourself, which he who foresees them breaks. What follows from this is that we neither work in what is necessary nor for it. I mean that we either do not desire what we cannot achieve, or what is to be achieved late, and after having passed through much shame. Let us recognize the vanity of our desires, not placing them in that in which the work is to turn out vain and without effect, where the effect is to be unworthy of what was worked for. Because sadness almost always follows if they do not happen, or if they do happen, they come to cause shame. Chapter 12. It is convenient to reform one's walks, which in many men are so continuous that they are always wandering through houses and theaters, offering themselves to the business of others, imitating those who are always busy. And if you ask one of these when he leaves home, where he is going or what he is thinking about, he will answer, "By God, I do not know. I will visit some people and do some business." They go without determination, looking for occupations. And without doing what they had determined, they do what first offered itself to them. Their wandering is vain and without counsel, like that of ants that climb trees, and after having reached the top, they go down empty to the trunk. Many are those who spend their life similar to these, One could rightly call it a restless laziness. You will have compassion for others, as for people who are fleeing a fire, who, trampling those they meet, rush headlong and make others rush headlong. These people, after having rushed to greet someone who will not repay the courtesy, or to be present at the funeral of a person with whom they had no acquaintance, or to attend the viewing of some lawsuit, in which they are always a litigant, or the wedding of one who marries often, following their litter and helping in many parts to carry it, when they return to their houses with an empty weariness, they swear that they neither know why they went out nor where they were, having to walk the same steps the following day. Let your work, then, be directed toward some end and look toward a safe place. Industry does not move the restless and crazy. False images of things move them, because some vain hope obliges them. The appearance of that whose vanity the captive understanding does not comprehend invites them. The same thing happens to those who leave home only to increase the populace, insubstantial and slight occasions carrying them through the city, and without having anything to work on, it expels them from their houses at sunrise. And after having suffered 1,000 bumps to manage to greet many, being badly admitted by some, they find no one more difficultly at home than themselves. From this idleness originates the vice of always listening and inquiring into the secrets of the Republic and knowing many things that cannot be recounted safely, nor even known with safety. I think that, following this doctrine, Democritus began by saying, "He who wishes to live in tranquility, neither do many things in which he stands out, nor allow himself to be carried publicly to superfluous things. Because of those that are necessary, not only many must be done privately and publicly, but innumerable ones. But where the obligation of some important ministry does not call us, it is convenient to restrain our actions." Chapter 13. Because he who occupies himself with many things often surrenders himself to fortune, it being safer to make a few experiences of it, notwithstanding that it is convenient to think much about it, without promising oneself any security of its faith. The wise man will say, "I will make my voyage if there is no accident. I will be an auditor if no impediment presents itself, and my plans will turn out well if no hindrance intervenes." Saying this is what obliges us to affirm that nothing happens to the wise man against his expectation. We do not exempt him from human events, but from errors. Nor do we say that all things happen to him as he desired, but as he expected, because before undertaking them, he persuaded himself that something could happen that would impede the execution of his desires. And so it is necessary that for him who did not promise himself security in his intentions, the pain of seeing them frustrated comes more moderately. Chapter 14. We should also make ourselves flexible, without stubbornly clinging to determinations. Let us move to what success carries us to, and let us not fear changes of counsel or state, provided that we are not possessed by shallowness, a vice very contrary to quietude. Because stubbornness must necessarily be distressing and miserable in one from whom fortune repeatedly takes something away, and the shallowness of one who is never in one being must be more serious. To be ignorant of making a change when it is necessary and not knowing how to persevere in anything are things contrary to tranquility. It is therefore necessary that the spirit, separating itself from all external things, retreat to itself, trust in itself, and rejoice with itself. Let it embrace its own affairs as much as possible, abstracting itself from those of others and applying itself to itself without feeling the harms, judging even adverse things with benignity. News having reached our Zeno that all his estate had been drowned in a shipwreck, he said, "Fortune wants me to philosophize more unencumbered." A tyrant threatened the philosopher Theodorus with death, and that he would not be buried, and he replied, You have something to rejoice in, for my blood is in your power. But as for what you say about burial, you are ignorant, if you think it matters whether I rot above or below the earth. Canius Julius, a great man whose esteem is not harmed by having been born in our century, having argued with Caius for a long time, that Phalaris said to him as he was leaving, "So that you do not flatter yourself with vain hope, I have ordered you to be taken to execution." And he replied, "I thank you, most excellent prince." I am doubtful of what he meant by this, and many things occur to me. He wanted to affront him by making him understand how great his cruelty was, since he considered death a benefit. Or perhaps he reproached him for the ordinary folly of those who thanked him when he had killed their children and taken away their estates. Or perhaps he received death with joy, judging it to be freedom. Whatever it may be, the answer was of a gallant spirit. Someone will say that Caius could afterwards order Canius to live. Canius did not fear this, for the stability that Caius had in such cruel mandates was well known. Do you think that without some foundation he asked for a 5-day delay for the execution? What that man said and what he did, and the tranquility he was in, does not seem likely. He was playing chess when the bailiff who brought the crowd of many condemned to death ordered that he also be taken out. And after having been called, he counted the tokens and said to the one playing with him, "Note that after my death you do not lie, saying that you won against me." And calling the bailiff, he said, "You will be a witness that I am winning a token from him." Do you think that Canius was playing on the board? What he was doing was not playing, but mocking the tyrant. And seeing his friends crying over the loss they were suffering of such a man, he said to them, "Why are you sad? You are investigating whether souls are immortal, and I will know it now." And until the final moment of his death, he did not desist from inquiring into the truth and disputing about death, as was his custom. A disciple of his was following him, and being already near the tomb, where sacrifices were made every day to Caesar who pretended to be adored as God, he said to him, "What are you thinking, Canius? What is your judgment? Sacrifice to Caesar." Canius replied, "I have resolved to find out if in that very swift instant of death the soul feels itself leaving the body." And he promised that upon finding it out, he would visit his friends and advise them of what state the souls are in. Note this tranquility in the midst of the storms, and see a spirit worthy of eternity, who calls upon death for the investigation of truth, and placed in the final moment asks questions of the soul as it says goodbye to the body, learning not only until death but also from death itself. No one has philosophized longer. And so the memory of this great man will not be erased quickly, but rather he will always be spoken of with esteem. We will hold you at all times, O most clear head, for a great part of the Chian calamity. Chapter 15. And it is not enough to reject the causes of particular sadness, since without them, an abhorrence of the whole human race often possesses us, the crowd of so many fortunate wickednesses meeting us. And when we reflect on how rare simplicity is, how unknown innocence is, and how little faith is kept, except in him for whom it is good to keep it, and when we look at the gains and damages of sensuality, equally abhorred, when we see that ambition, not adjusted in its due terms, shines with its own clumsiness, the light hides from the spirit, and dark shadows come out when, because virtues are abated, it is neither allowed to hope for them, nor does it help to have them. We must, then, resolve not to hold all the vices of the populace as hateful, but as ridiculous, imitating Democritus rather than Heraclitus. The latter always wept whenever he went out in public, and the former laughed. The latter judged all our actions to be miseries, and the former held them to be follies. All things should be suffered with smoothness of spirit, it being a more human action to laugh at life than to weep over it. And add that he who laughs at the human race puts it under a greater obligation than he who weeps over it, because the former leaves some part of hope, and the latter foolishly weeps over that which he despairs of being able to remedy. And having considered everything, it is a greater greatness of spirit not to be able to curb laughter than not to be able to restrain tears. Because all the things that oblige us to be joyful or sad move the very slight affection of the spirit, without judging that in such an apparatus of things there is anything great, severe, or serious. Let each one propose all those things for which we come to be joyful or sad, and let him know that what Bion said is certain, that all the affairs of men were similar in their beginnings, and that the sanctity and severity of their life was nothing more than some attempts begun. And so it is wiser to placidly suffer public customs and human vices without passing to laugh at or weep over them, because it is an eternal misery to torment oneself with the evils of others, and to rejoice in them is an inhuman delight. In the same way, it is useless sadness to weep and cloud one's face because someone is burying their son. For even in your own evils, it is convenient to give to pain only the part it asks for, and not what custom asks for. Because there are many who shed tears for others to see, having dry eyes as long as there is no one watching them, and they judge it a shameful thing not to cry when others do. And this evil of being dependent on the opinion of others has been introduced in such a way that even in things of very little importance, feigned pain comes. After this follows a part that not without cause usually saddens and causes worry, when the ends of the good are bad, such as Socrates dying in a prison and Rutilius living in exile, and Pompey and Cicero handing over their necks to their very own dependents, and that the great Cato, the sole image of virtues leaning on his sword, gives satisfaction of himself and of the Republic simultaneously. It is therefore convenient to complain that fortune pays with such wicked rewards. For what can each one expect when he sees that the good suffer great evils? Well, what should we do in such a case? Fix our eyes on the way they suffered, and if they were strong, desire their spirits. But if they died, womanly and weakly, there is no need to care about the loss. Either they were worthy of their virtue pleasing you, or unworthy of their weakness being imitated. Because what thing is more clumsy than those whom great men, dying manfully, made timid? Let us praise him who for so many reasons is worthy of praise. And let us say of him, the stronger you were, the happier you were. You have already escaped human events and envy and disease. You have left the prison, you who were not deserving of bad fortune. And the gods will judge it an unworthy thing that she had any dominion over you. Those who, when death arrives, recoil and fix their eyes on life, must be laid hands on. I will not weep for him who is joyful, nor will I weep for him who weeps, because the former, with his joy, took away my tears, and the latter, with his own, made himself unworthy of those of others. Should I weep for Hercules burned alive? For Regulus pierced with many nails? For Cato, who strongly suffered so many wounds? All of these, with a short expense of brief time, found a way to eternalize themselves, reaching immortality through death. It is likewise not a small matter of care to have great care in composing yourself, not showing yourself simple, a fault into which many fall, whose life is feigned and ordered for mere ostentation. And this continuous diligence tortures them, fearing that they will be found in a different figure from the one they are accustomed to, because this care never slackens while we judge that every time they look at us, they esteem us. And there are many events that, against their will, strip them of the fiction. And supposing that this feigned composure happens well for them, it is not possible that those who always live with a mask have a pleasant or secure life. And on the contrary, candid simplicity, adorned with itself without placing a veil over one's customs, enjoys infinite delights. But this life also has the danger of contempt, because when all things are patent to everyone, there are many who hold in little esteem what they deal with most closely, although virtue has no danger of being debased by approaching the eyes. And it is much better to be despised for being simple than to live tormented with perpetual simulation. But despite all this, it is convenient to set a limit to it, there being a great difference between living with simplicity and living with negligence. It is very convenient to retreat into ourselves, because conversation with those who are not our equals discomposes everything well composed, and renews the affections and the wounds of everything that is weak and badly cured in the spirit. But it is also convenient to mix and alternate solitude and communication, because the former will awaken in us desires to communicate with men, and the latter to communicate with ourselves, one being the antidote of the other. Solitude will cure the abhorrence that one has of the crowd, and the crowd will cure the boredom of solitude. For the understanding should not be always persevering with equality in the same intention, for it must sometimes pass to entertainments. Socrates was not ashamed to play with children, and Cato recreated in banquets the spirit fatigued with public cares. Scipio danced to the rhythm with that military and triumphant body of his, but not making effeminate changes of those that exceed womanly softness, like those that are now used, but as those ancient men used to do, who entertained themselves between play and holidays, dancing manfully, without being able to lose credit even if their enemies saw them dancing. Some refreshment must be given to the spirits so that, rested, they rise better and braver to work. And just as fertile fields should not be fatigued, because not giving some intermission to their fecundity will quickly weaken them, so continuous work breaks the impulses of the spirit, which, recreated, will take more strength. From the continuation in cares is born a kind of inability and decay of the spirits, and the effective desire of men will not incline to so much, if in entertainment and play it did not find an almost natural delight, the frequent use of which takes away all the vigor and force of the spirits. Sleep is necessary to repair forces, but if you continue it day and night, it will become death. There is a great difference between loosening or letting go of a thing. The legislators instituted holidays so that men would gather publicly, interposing with joy an almost necessary temperament to work. And great men, as I have said, took certain days off every month, and others did not leave any day without dividing it between cares and leisure, as we know of Polyonius, a great orator whom no business detained after the 10th hour. And afterwards he did not even want to read letters, so that no care would result from them, repairing in those 2 hours of rest the work of the entire day. Others divided the day, reserving for the evenings the businesses of less care. And our ancestors prohibited new reports from being made in the Senate after the 10th hour. The soldier divides the watches, and he who comes from the field is free from doing sentry duty. It is convenient to broaden the mind, giving it some leisure that encourages and gives strength. And the walk that is taken should be in open country, so that in the free sky and with much breath the spirit rises and increases. And sometimes riding a horse, taking a trip, and changing location will give vigor. Banquets and a somewhat more licensed drink, and even reaching the point of intoxication at times, not in a way that drowns us, but that amuses us, will lighten our cares, drawing the spirit out of its confinement. Because just as wine cures some diseases, so it also cures sadness. Bacchus, the inventor of wine, was called Liber, not because of the freedom he gives to the tongue, but because he frees the spirit from the servitude of cares, strengthening it and making it more vigorous and audacious for all intentions. But just as moderation is healthy in freedom, so it is in wine. Solon and Arcesilaus are said to have been given to wine. Cato was accused of intoxication, but he who opposes this fault to Cato will more easily persuade that it is honest than that Cato was clumsy. But this license of wine should not be taken often, so that the spirit does not become accustomed to bad customs, although sometimes it must go out to rejoicing and freedom, rejecting sad sobriety somewhat. Because if we give credit to the Greek poet, to go mad sometimes gives joy. And if to Plato, he who is in full judgment in vain opens the doors to poetry. And if to Aristotle, rarely was there great genius without some mixture of madness. No one can say something superior, and that exceeds the rest, unless it is the haughty understanding, which, despising the vulgar and customary, rises higher with the sacred instinct, because then with the mouth of a man it sings something superior. As long as a person is in himself, no sublime thought can be offered to him, and placed on a height, it is convenient that he depart from the customary, and that he rise, and that biting the bit he snatches the rider who guides him, taking him where he would not dare to run. With this you have, O dear Serenus, the things that can defend tranquility, those that can restore it, and those that can resist the vices that seek to introduce themselves. But it is convenient that you know that none of these things is sufficient for those who have to guard such a weak thing, unless the spirit that is about to fall is surrounded by continuous and assisting care. Thank you for listening to this audiobook until the end. If you enjoyed the content, we invite you to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. This way, you won't miss our next publications.